I have a question for all of you materialists out there who believe that science is the only way to answer the questions of what is true about reality, or that science is the only way to tell us what is true about the world we live in. I find it very interesting that if you look at all the scientific equations, E equals mc squared and so on, you never find any reference to consciousness. The single most important thing about our experience as human beings is that we are conscious. If we were not conscious, there would be no science. All our experience of the world is mediated through consciousness. I pinch myself, I feel a pain. I look at red, I look at blue, I see a color. I hear sounds. Isn't it interesting that there are no scientific laws, no mathematical equations that say anything whatsoever about subjective experience? Philosophers call this the hard problem of consciousness, which is, how do we explain consciousness, given what we know about science, given what science tells us about the world? Because science tells us absolutely nothing about how we experience subjective feelings. So, I ask, why would anyone think that science is going to explain reality when it can't tell us about the single most important aspect of our experience of the world, namely consciousness? And I also find it interesting that the majority, it seems, of scientists, at least the leading scientists today, at least the ones that get all the media attention, are atheists. And they take that as basically just the way things are. I mean, it's not even a debatable issue among most philosophers and scientists nowadays. And yet they have not even a clue as to how to explain consciousness. Now, I personally believe that God exists, but that's beside the point for right now. I would think that one possible explanation for the possibility of subjective experience, which we all know is a fact of life, is that there's a God. Because God has a subjective, there's a subjective aspect to God. God is, whatever God is, the Christianity, all the religions say God is, all the monotheistic religions say God is spirit. Meaning God has there's a conscious aspect to God, which goes totally against modern scientific materialism, for which all subjective experience, consciousness, arises as an emergent quality millions, or probably actually billions of years after the Big Bang. So, the dominant religion, quote, religion of the modern era is science, which is totally materialistic and sees consciousness as arising as an emergent quality after billions of years, after the Big Bang. And yet, science can tell us absolutely nothing about how that happened. And I guess the idea is that, well, someday it will explain it. It hasn't done it yet, but someday in the future. So it's a paycheck that they have to, make. It's a paycheck that they have to make. They have to pay at some date in the future, which never happens. So someday science is going to explain consciousness. I guess that's how most scientists look at it, even though they don't have a clue. It seems to me that the view of somebody like Colin Wilson, the philosopher, or Noam Chomsky, who are referred to as mysterians, who see that there are certain mysteries about the universe which are totally beyond the capability of the human mind to even comprehend. It would seem to me, and this is Colin Wilson's own view, is that consciousness is one of these mysteries which will never be explained by science. And our human brain is incapable of ever understanding it. Now, I'm not trying to prove that this shows that there's a God, but I would at least think that any honest atheist would be a little less dogmatic in their absolute assurance that there is no God. Now, obviously there are atheists who do not have absolute assurance. I would think that most atheists would have some type of doubt. That would be the only rational thing, I would think, as a rational creature, to at least have some doubt. But I would at least think that the hypothesis of God, of some being which is conscious, and its consciousness is not an emergent quality. It's from eternity. It's always been. I would think that would at least be a possibility, a hypothesis worth taking seriously. In fact, much more seriously than atheism. Some people often refer to Spinoza to support their view that there's no God because of, as you know, for Spinoza, Deus sive natura, God and nature are identical. So you often hear, Spinoza, Einstein said the God I believe in is Spinoza's God. So people say, there's no God, creator God. The God I believe in is Spinoza's God. Well, that's really dishonest. It's not really even true to Spinoza. Spinoza, even though he did identify God and nature, for Spinoza, God, which is an eternal being, one of the essential qualities of God is consciousness, spirit. Descartes' mind, Descartes broke the world of minds and bodies. For Spinoza, God has mind, or consciousness, is an inherent essential property of God. And consciousness for Spinoza is not an emergent quality. So Spinoza was not an atheist in any sense of the way modern scientists talk about it, because modern materialists, and most scientists are materialists, even though we have no idea what matter is, as Chomsky points out again and again. Spinoza was not a materialist in the modern sense of the word. He was not a materialist. Spinoza believed that consciousness, or the mind, was an essential attribute of God from eternity. So, I just ask you, I would like somebody to explain to me, if you're an atheist out there, and there are many of them out there, why are you so certain of your atheism when your atheism cannot explain, even begin to explain, consciousness. Atheistic view of reality, a theistic view, explains consciousness very easily. Consciousness is an irreducible aspect of reality. So, if you're an atheist and a materialist, and you believe consciousness is an emergent property, I ask you, why do you believe it's an emergent property when science so far has made absolutely no progress in explaining it, and probably never will? Consciousness is something that cannot be explained by other properties, just like electromagnetism is irreducible. Gravity, irreducible. Consciousness is irreducible. It's not an emergent property. It doesn't come from matter. And there are many philosophers nowadays who take panpsychism. I'm not a panpsychist, but there are many philosophers who take panpsychism seriously. And Chomsky, Noam Chomsky, creator of modern linguistics, his view is that since we have absolutely no idea whatsoever what matter is, and if you talk to a physicist who knows what they're talking about, they will admit it. They have no idea what matter is. No idea whatsoever. So Berkeley's idealism, Hegel's idealism, may be in fact true. So I ask, if you're a dogmatic atheist and you believe that there's no evidence for God, I would suggest, I'm not saying this is a proof for God's existence, but I would think it's a hypothesis that's much more likely, much more plausible than your hypothesis, which is that there's no God.